Okay, finally your report. Now, I already gave you a little bit of this. I made a file with the proper name as far as it's not the proper type, it's not a PDF, but the first part is correct. And I added a title and a course and my name. And then I kind of started a structure. But now we look and it says, okay, make an introductory paragraph telling the reader what you are accomplishing in this project, and I help you, okay, explain the problem of determining the spatial accessibility, mention Pikeville Medical Center, and list the locations. So you can take a lot of, you can go ahead and take a lot of what I put in this project description way back here on the background. Certainly you can take things from this background on the accessibility and the distance. If you want, you can even talk about the larger view, but it's fine to kind of go with these types of things, and then our problem, we're gonna do this, and you may do this almost word for word. Now, you don't have to put it in quotes, you don't have to reference me. Why not? It's my class. I know where you got it. Okay, so I'm not worried about that. So when you're taking stuff, if you take something straight from here as far as explanation, yeah, you don't have to quote it and so forth. So like up here, I quoted this because I took it out of this reference 2 here. And otherwise you would have no idea where I got that. But if you quote me from this project, I know where you got it. And so you can paraphrase things I've said here and so forth. Don't worry about that. Okay, so oops, where am I going? There we go. We want, well, let me get back down here to required items. So, I hadn't noticed that sticking way out on the page. I'll have to try to fix that too. Okay, so, and mention Pikeville, list the 10 locations. I did those things as well. You can put all that in your introductory paragraph. Make sure you do it. It should be prose. So, again, going back to what I did up here, you didn't see me just say, here's a sentence and a bullet item and no, I have paragraphs. I have complete sentences. That's what you need to do. I have headings. Now, the headings you don't want to do, and, so let's go back to the top of the document I started. So if you want to make sure I see that you have various required items, you are more than welcome to do something like introduction. And, then hit enter and then do your introduction. Okay, crisis, stabilization, units, blah, 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 I got all that. We are centering on the Pikeville Med Center, blah, and so forth. We will check. Oops, nice auto spell autocorrect. Got to watch that sometimes though. We will check 10 locations, colon, Clevenger's branch, Zebulon, oops, Zebulon, blah, you know, so forth. So there's my introduction. Now, you know, I could go up here and I could make it bold. Somewhere there's a bold. There, introduction. So now I'm down here. Okay, so there I've done my introduction. And go back here to required items. Okay, and I seem to have hit all that. You can add a little more if you want. Now, a section on the Euclidean distance. Make sure we define it. You can pretty much, you know, kind of take this. Now, you aren't going to be able to just type that formula in. You can try to handle that various ways. Again, though, you know, so here is Euclidean distance. Oops, distance. Okay, we define Euclidean distance between 2 points A equal X. And if you wanted to write XA, comma, YA, I am fine with that, right? And B, because it's just going to be a lot easier for you, equal XB, comma, YB. Now, you can go in and make things subscripts and various things like that, but if you want to go with something like that, great. You know, as, and then I come down here. Now, you can't do the square root side. Now, you can go into an equation editor and all that stuff. That's okay. You could write something like square root, parenthesis, maybe a space to make it a little more readable, XA minus XB, parenthesis, use a caret and a 2 like that, plus YA minus YB, a caret and a square, space to make it more readable like that. Period. There you go. We define, okay. Then, you know, it says show an example with those 2 points. Okay, and so then I would say as an example. So I'm using English to tell you these things, right? As an example for, say, A equal minus 3 comma 6 and B equal 4 comma negative 8. We have, and you know, I think what I'd probably do is just copy that thing and put in my numbers, minus 3 and minus 6 and so forth, and I'd probably then say equals and give whatever that ends up being. Okay, so, you know, equals something, I don't know what. And again, you know, here I can make that bold so the reader notices. You know, show an example, and for those, then, explain you can use Desmos and include your screenshot. Okay, so we're getting to that screenshot finally. You know, maybe a paragraph. We can use Desmos to do our calculations. Um, and then something like C figure 1. And you know how you pointed out and so forth, that's fine. But you know, we can use Desmos to do our calculations, C figure 1. And there you go. Okay, so you got it. Now you come down here, so you include the figure that way. So you can use this kind of as an outline. So we've done our screenshot there from 110. Explain that you use Desmos to calculate the Euclidean distances for the 10 locations. Include your screenshot and then give the table. Okay, so I'll do that a little bit more, but then you know, I'm going to probably kind of call it quits at that. But so okay, we used a prepared map and scaled graph in Desmos to calculate our distances for the 10 locations. Oh, my ugly mug is in the way, so there we go. Okay. And again, you know, you don't have to say a whole lot more than that. You know, C, because we have the figure, right? So C figure 2, I guess, right? Figure 2. And you know, there's figure 2. And notice, okay, this, you know, right at this moment, this figure 2 got put down here. Well, at some point, you don't want that. You need to fix that. That's ugly. It's not readable. That's a bad thing. So, you know, if you just had to make this smaller, take out some lines, right? I've got some extra lines there. So, oh, and look at that. It's up on that page now. So, there we go. And here I can say the resulting Euclidean distances are given in table 3. Well, there you go. Okay. Now, at this point, you could mention that they're all about the same, but you don't have to. You know, you can just say, hey, here are the distances. And then, you know, it continues. So, you know, we've made it through the Euclidean section here. All right, I've gotten all those things. Okay, great. So I've got them all. Now, you know, a section on grid distance, kind of the same sort of thing. Should mimic very much what you have. Now, what you might end up doing, so it gives your table from task 133. Now, I will say that, so we put the table in that had both of those. So let's go back here. And let's get down to that table. So this had both of those. Now, I suppose what you could do, so see, it kind of puts it in as a picture. Technically, you know, I mean, you know, so I said put them all in, and that's fine. I mean, you know, don't wreck a good story with facts and all that. And but what you could do, if you wanted, in something like this, if you thought yourself, that's kind of silly that we're talking about grid distance, and in this table 6, and I've got them both. Well, maybe you want to tell your story and you just only want to talk about the grid distances, so maybe you get rid of that. And you come back here, and all you have to do is you can play with this a little bit. I could do a copy and paste or something like that, right? So I could take this, copy it, I can paste it here. I can take this, copy it, and paste it here. And then I could highlight this, copy it, and paste it in place of this one. And that'd be fine. That'd be okay. This one's fine as well. But I just want to point out that, if you think you can communicate it better than sort of the minimum I've asked for, you go right ahead and communicate it better. But this would be fine. So, we would have that one, and we would have those same sentences and paragraphs of explanation. And then you are on to the section on the Google Paths, and here you just want to kind of explain what you're doing, give those 2 screenshots with figure numbers, and and then the final table of distances. And then you get to the analysis section, and you want to answer each of those questions. And so let's look at those questions again. And so what you want to do is something like, okay, we're down here and we get this last table. Okay. Okay, and so I have my analysis section. And, we see from our results that all the Euclidean distances were about 5 miles. Okay. This is in contrast to the other distance definitions for our locations. Okay, and then when you look at the grid distances, okay, the grid distances varied between 5 and, here I don't know the answer off the top of my head, miles. You will know because you filled in your table here. Right, so they varied between 5 and some number of miles. So what am I doing there? Well, again, look back here. It said, how do the grid distances compare to each other? Well, what were they? Well, they were 5, 7, something, 5, and so they varied between those. And that's probably about all you would really have to say there about how they compared, right? And then you could say something like, notice that, all grid distances were at least as large as their corresponding Euclidean distances. Okay, so there, we're answering the questions. It doesn't really take a lot in this first one to answer those. Now, it gets a little more complicated with, as we go down here to the path distances. So again, how do the path distances compare to each other? Well, you can give a range. You might also say, are most around a certain amount or something like that? Well, I don't know. Maybe they are. How do they compare to the Euclidean distance? Well, again, they're all bigger. But now it gets a little more complicated when you start, talking about this, because you'll say, well, for instance, and we can actually look at a case here, up here, you can say, in comparing the Google distances with the grid distances, you can say, well, there's no specific relationship. For instance, Clevenger's branch, the grid distance was 5 miles and the Google distance was 7 miles. However, for Zebulon, the grid distance was 7 miles and the Google distance was only 6.2 miles. And so there is no clear relationship between grid distance and Google distance, or path distance. Really, we're talking about the path distance going along roads, right? So if we look at the Cartesian grid versus the roads, in this case, for what we're looking at, there is no relationship. Okay, and then similarly, it's more complicated when you look at the time. And so these last few, will be a little more complicated to talk about, but you do them in that same basic way. And then now here, I'm telling you sort of what, it's not necessarily the right answer, but I'm telling you, okay, let's argue that we want to use time in this case. So I'm asking you, why, when you look at this completed chart and you think about these questions here and so forth, why might we want to think of time as our actual distance when we're talking about accessibility? Okay, and so that is item 2.8, and we get through all that analysis. And then finally, just a summary paragraph of what you learned in this project. What did this project do for you? Now, I'm not looking here for, why this was a stupid project, and that math has always been a terrible thing and we shouldn't ask you to do it and that sort of thing. That's not what it says to do. You haven't answered the question. What did you learn? Okay? Now, if you truly learn nothing, which if you do the project, I have a hard time believing that would be the case, but if you truly learn nothing, well, then I guess you would state that. But somehow I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't know how much you all knew, even just the premise of crisis stabilization units. I don't know how much you knew about that. I didn't say much, but maybe you learned something even just about that. Or you learned something about that, distance is a bit more complicated than we originally make it out to be in a lot of math classes, because, well, yes, there's Euclidean distance, but if we're on a grid, then that doesn't work so well. If we're actually out and about in the county or in the state, it really doesn't work very well. And so, you probably learned something there. And so you just want to mention what that was. So it's only wrong, whatever you write is only wrong there if you don't talk about what you learned. If you know, is because then you haven't answered that prompt. But there you go. That's the write-up. And then once you've had the write-up, so you can save. So now this is, in your case, most likely a doc element, you know, Microsoft Office thing. And so all you have to do, though, usually is under File, you can, in almost any of these, you look for Export or Export As. So here, Export As, when I click on that, it gives me an option of as a PDF or directly as PDF. I think if I do directly as PDF, what happens is it doesn't ask me if I want to rename it or anything like that. So, you know, that's probably what I would do. Now, if I clicked on Export here, now, you know, on mine it says all formats and I can choose, and there's a PDF. And so I would just pick PDF, and, you know, there's the name, and I would save, and I would do that. And that's how I make the PDF document. Okay, so once you have the document, the PDF part's not a big deal, but just make it a PDF document, or, you know, I won't bother grading it because my tool for grading it won't work on a Microsoft Office document. It will work on a PDF. So that's why I won't grade it. And so at some point I'll probably send a note to you and say, hey, it's the wrong format. If you want it graded, get it into PDF. All right, well, I think that's about all I'm going to say. So for this first project, I give you lots and lots of guidance, I hope.